Today we are going on an extraordinary research journey to the oldest occupied palace in Europe. In the library at Windsor Castle, we are going to be looking at an otherworldly selection of books and manuscripts that were owned by the young Queen Victoria. I can't quite believe that I'm sharing this with you. We all know that the royal family are historically patrons of the arts. Shakespeare's acting company was called the King's Men because King James I was their patron. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert were also famously supportive of culture and the arts, and even opened Albertopolis in South Kensington, which has the Royal Albert Hall, the V&A, and is a hub for art and culture. And the King and Queen today continue this history of royal patronage of the arts, for example through the Queen's ongoing work to promote literacy. But while this public support of the arts has been historically and hugely important, we also see that art and literature is incredibly important within the family historically. And in this video we're going to learn about the young Queen Victoria when she was Princess Victoria and her literary and artistic childhood, because she was an artist, she was a writer, she was a massive reader. So we are venturing to Windsor Castle today. Yes, actual Windsor Castle, which is actually the longest occupied palace in Europe. It was founded by William the Conqueror in the 11th century, and this is also where Victoria and Albert spent their honeymoon and where Victoria celebrated her 18th birthday. And we are going to go to the library to look at some of the most extraordinary manuscripts and books, ones that were owned by the actual Queen Victoria. And using this, we're going to think about how literary patronage kind of existed within the family unit itself. So we're here in the library at Windsor Castle. This particular part of the castle is Elizabethan, and the fireplace behind me is from 1583. Victoria was, before the late Queen, the longest reigning monarch in English history, and as an adult she was a tremendous reader. She owned copies of Jane Eyre, she read Shakespeare, she was reading Sir Walter Scott's Peveril on the Peak with her husband Prince Albert just before he died. But let's get into the manuscripts because there are some incredible ones here. And this is one that I was particularly excited to be able to show you. This is a catalogue of all of the books that Princess Victoria owned between 1825 and 1835. So that's between the ages of like 6 and 16. And the binding itself just shows how important Victoria's books were for her, because look at that stunning binding. This is known as half binding. That's where you have some leather here and then you have leather on the corners. That term half binding is basically just proportional to how much of the cover is covered in leather, and you can see that we also got this leather rectangle in the middle with this beautiful gold lettering saying Catalogue of Princess Victoria's books. And then we've got these wonderful marble end papers, and we go into the books. So starting in 1825 when she was just 6, and you can see that these are all of the books that she acquired in that year. It is a meticulous log. Definitely guides like this did exist. So Francis Vane, for example, kept a meticulous logbook of all of the books in the Apperthorpe Hall Library. But to have one of these of books owned by a child, and a female child at that, is honestly like just unbelievably cool. And it's unusual, not least because it requires the child to own a large amount of books. Like, you have to own a lot of books for you to be able to fill out a massive volume like this. And admittedly, not all of it is full. But we've got like long lists of religious books at the back, and then at the front we have a wonderful range of didactic literature, stories, annuals, which show the breadth of her reading taste. One that I'm just going to kind of point out, let's find it, is this book here, Fabulous Histories by Mrs. Trimmer, and then underneath it says the same. So we know that she owned 2 copies of Fabulous Histories. I've got one of those copies here. So this is a beautiful kind of like gilded covered volume. The edges have also been sprayed, so they've got like a marble print on the side, which is very popular in this period. So this is a very charming story of this family of humans and this family of robins who learn to coexist in harmony, and they become friends. This copy is also completely remarkably signed by Victoria. Like what? This in my hands was one of her books. Of course, in the catalogue it says that there are 2 copies of this book, but only one remains. And if we look here, we can see in the left column in red, it says given to HSH, the Princess Hanloa Longenburg. And actually, if we look at this catalogue, we see so many books being given to this same princess. And when I was looking through it, I was thinking, who is this person? Who is this person who is receiving all of Princess Victoria's books? And it was her niece Eliza, who was the daughter of her sister Theodora. Just as a side note as well, Eliza died at the age of 21 tragically, and she was really young. And she doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. She is this incredibly important figure in Princess Victoria's life, and yet there is so little information on her. But she's kind of eternalized in this catalogue, which I think is beautiful. So, Princess Eliza. We know that Princess Victoria gave Princess Eliza a number of books, and there was a 10-year age gap, so you can very much imagine, Victoria passing down these books that have been so important to her, and it's so similar. This is the thing which is wonderful about looking at things like this, is you realise that Victoria was like a child. She was a real human being, and she did something which we, like, kind of grandparents might do. They might pass down a book that they love. Siblings and cousins passing down books to each other. We get this kind of intra-family book trade, and it speaks again to that kind of like the literariness of this family, and how important that literary education was. So aside from being a reader, Victoria was also an artist, and she did these absolutely exquisite watercolour sketches. And we're going to look at some of those now. She painted costumes and stills and characters from the ballets that she saw at the Royal Opera House. She painted animals, but the one that I want to look at is one of Princess Eliza, the Eliza that is mentioned in the catalogue that we just looked at. So the picture of Eliza in question is in this book. So this book it's kind of like a guard book, and it's been filled with these pasted in pictures and drawings that she did through childhood. But all of these stills, they're absolutely wonderful. There's one of her dog here. The one in question is this one. And this is Princess Eliza. It was drawn on Saturday the 26th of July 1834, and she writes, "This was the day that dearest Theodora went." So she drew this on the day that Eliza and Theodora left her at Kensington Palace. She writes, "Dear little Eliza in her travelling dress, which she wore the morning that she left us, from nature." So when she says from nature, she means that she was sketching Eliza as she was sat there. And so you can kind of just imagine this like beautiful intimate moment of Eliza sat in the same room as her niece, as her beloved niece that she thought very highly of, and sat there just watching her very intently and drawing her. And it's such a beautiful moment to kind of, for us to envision now, but also to kind of see that captured, to see what she was looking at captured here on the page, and then pasted into this guard book. It's a kind of very true form of magic, I think. So we've got this painting of Eliza that Victoria did, but a couple of days before, Theodora drew this. This is from July 15th, 1834, and then, as I say, this one's from 26th of July 1834. And these two are very, very similar paintings. I don't think it's far-fetched to say that the painting that Victoria did of Eliza reading, considering the angles, considering the similarity of dress, considering the kind of like the detail of the hair, was inspired by the painting that her sister had done just a couple of days before. And even more wonderful is when we put these two drawings alongside the others that Princess Victoria did in July. So all of these depict Eliza in a similar position, reading in three of them, and then in this final one it says Eliza at her evening toilette. So we see that it wasn't just this one-off picture which mimics that earlier one from Theodora, but all four of these. Theodora, meanwhile, on the same time frame, continues to draw Eliza, but draws her from different angles. So we see this one of her reading, but Theodora's drawn her from a different angle, whereas Princess Victoria focuses on her from the same angle that her sister had done that original painting. I think putting these corpuses next to each other, we get a clearer sense of how Victoria takes influence from her sister and is maybe painting with that original drawing in mind.
There is a critic, Catherine Sutherland, she writes on juvenilia and especially Jane Austen's juvenilia, and she says that all juvenilia is just mimicry, and here we get Victoria mimicking, but not mimicking, Turner or Michelangelo or like kind of some great, in quotation marks, artist, but rather mimicking somebody that she sees as great, mimicking her dear sister Theodora in the style, and there's something so kind of so human about that, again, so loving, so beautiful.
We maybe also see how important this drawing was to Victoria based on where she put it. So this ends up in this absolutely gorgeous album.
This book is just like, it's one of those books that you have no words for. Like, the binding is just so extravagant. This green velvet cover is actually much more vibrant in real life than it is on it showing up on camera. But this album was a gift from Princess Charlotte to Princess Victoria, and I think it's so wonderful that Princess Theodora's painting of Eliza, the one of her reading the book, ends up in here, whereas Victoria's doesn't. Like, and it kind of again speaks to the respect that Victoria has for her sister, and the respect that she has for her art. There are a number of paintings that Theodora has done which end up in this stunning album, and as ever, the binding of the book and the beauty of the book ends up bestowing importance on the works inside. So we know how much Victoria cared for Eliza and Theodora when we look at her journal. Can you believe that I'm literally holding Princess Victoria's journal right now? She would have picked this up every evening to write with. She was a diligent journal taker. She wrote 43,000 pages of journal entries over the course of her life, and started her diary when she was 13. I think it was 141 volumes that she filled, which is just unbelievable. But the entry that we are going to turn to is from 5th of June 1834, which was when Theodora and Eliza came to stay and came to visit. And she just speaks so highly of her sister. She says, at 11, they arrived, my dearest sister Theodora, whom I had not seen for nearly 6 years. And she writes, as for the children, they are the dearest little loves I ever saw. And she's underlined dearest and ever, which just shows how much affection she has for Eliza and then Charles, who's her nephew. It's even more beautiful knowing that this journal was kept by Victoria kind of semi-privately. Like, she's writing this for herself so that she doesn't forget this lovely moment that she's been sharing with her sister and her niece and nephew. Gosh, I love that she's underlined dearest and ever.
So we see and we've seen that Victoria kind of becomes her own patron to the arts within her family, because she gives these books to her niece to read. And I really like to think that the book that Eliza is reading in that painting that Victoria has done is one of the books that she gave her. So the final thing we will look at in this intrafamilial web of influence in art and literature is Princess Victoria's writing, because she read and she painted and she drew, but Victoria also wrote. So I've already said about the journals that she kept, these 43,000 pages worth of journal entries, but she also wrote a book.
And this here, I think, might be the most incredible, marvelous thing that we've pulled out today. It's a composition book, as you can tell from the title on the front, but it's not just any composition book. From the cover, it could be any collection of school writings or translations or, like handwriting practice, but it's so much more than this. This is a novel, kind of a story, an extended story, which Princess Victoria wrote when she was just 10 years old. And this is a story of Alice Lassay, who is sent away to boarding school, and we get all of these stories of like the different girls in the boarding school and in her class, and the narrative structure of it is truly impressive, especially for somebody aged 10.
"Oh, do not send me away, dear papa," exclaimed Alice Lasey as she threw her arms round her papa's neck.
But wonderfully, this book and her journals are both kind of dedicated to her mother.
Because she writes, "To my dear mamma, this, my first attempt at composition, is affectionately and dutifully inscribed by her affectionate daughter Victoria."
Her writing is indebted to her mother. Again, as with Theodora and Eliza, we see that Victoria's mother plays a role in her artistic life. Royal patronage of the arts does in part surely come from appreciating it yourself. So the current king does support artists, but he also is an artist and paints watercolor paintings. Art is important to him personally. And the Queen Consort, as I say, a huge proponent of literacy. She's patron to the National Literacy Trust, to Book Trust, to the Royal Society of Literature, and also runs the Queen's Reading Room, which is an online book club. But this again speaks to her own love of reading and her experience of books being important. That kind of informs the patronage which is being done. And so I think it's so lovely to think about that kind of public patronage on a more intimate level. So as we said at the beginning, Victoria with Albert would go on to publicly support the arts and culture very vocally, but also when we look back to her childhood, we see that that was happening on kind of a tiny microcosmic scale within the home, as she was perhaps influenced by her sister, as she passed on kind of books to her niece, and as she wrote stories in dedication to her mother. It's a lovely circular thing. But that brings us to the end of this video. I really hope that you learned something and that you found it interesting. I certainly did. And I still can't believe that my hands have actually touched these books that Queen Victoria owned and handled. I'm still in shock. I'm genuinely so grateful for this opportunity, beyond words. The coolest thing I've ever done. But thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you have more than just a productive week.